and welcome to another episode of PDA Dad UK. In this episode, I've got the pleasure of talking to the fabulous Nicola Reekie, who is the organiser of the Positive PDA Summit and the main mastermind behind it. She also runs the PDA Sanctuary on Facebook and the PDA Sanctuary as a physical thing as well, which she talks about in the interview. This is an interview I recorded with my co-conspirator for the Grumpy Dads, Chris, and we felt it fit more with the PDA Dad channel, so that's why we put it here. Fabulous interview. Nicola's a tremendously interesting person and really interested in the well-being of parents. So enjoy, sit back, grab a coffee, and welcome Nicola Reekie.
Hi, thank you. Morning, Duncan. Morning, Chris. How are you?
Thanks for joining us, Nicola. We really appreciate you coming on to talk to us. Duncan mentioned about PDA Sanctuary. Could you tell us a little bit about it? How did you get started?
For anybody who doesn't yet know what PDA stands for, because apparently it's an acronym for lots of different things. It stands for the Pathological Demand Avoidance, which comes under or is a cluster of behaviours as part of the autism spectrum. And the reason I created the PDA Sanctuary was one of the challenges that somebody who has PDA is the anxiety need to be in control. And as parent, carer, guardian, it can be really challenging, especially before you know what's going on, and the lack of understanding and support for parents. And I'd really started to notice from my own experience of hitting burnout after sort of going down lots of dead-end roads and not getting up any ideas or support. And my background is I'm a holistic practitioner. So for years I was doing Reiki, reflexology, Indian head massage, and another one called theta healing. I had a lot of knowledge in wellbeing, but even I hit burnout and realised not long after being in the PDA community that a lot of parents talking about their own emotional struggles and wellbeing issues.
It's exhausting, isn't it? I never knew I could be as tired as I am when I have to. So for those who don't know, my daughter is Pathological Demand Avoidance. She has PDA. One of those things that across the country it's not diagnosed in many areas of the country, but everyone kind of acknowledges it's there. I've never felt as exhausted. Last year, after the summer holidays, I was ready to dig a hole in the back garden and join the wombats. It was just horrific. And because the demand avoidance is such a tricky thing to deal with because they're so smart. My daughter is really, really smart. So you get these tactics that you can play with. Well, you've got to give the illusion of control. So rather than saying tidy your room, say, what should we put away first? And that worked once. And then the next time, you just want me to clean my room. And so the avoidance kicks in with that and she's worked it out. And you're constantly trying to chase your tail, finding new ways to just please get your room clean. Yeah, it's hard.
The negotiating is amazing. And in some ways, they ought to be running the country because their negotiating skills are the best. But what I find really interesting is when you do a negotiation, is if you give in too quickly. So say, Chris, you said to me, can I have 10 apples? And I say, yes. You're like, oh, no. Whereas if I go, oh, no, 5, and we start the bartering system, then it works. But if I say yes straight away, not interested.
There's a need to argue, isn't there? It's almost an innate need to, and I think that links back into the whole control aspect of PDA, which is the central facet of PDA, is that need to be in control. But yeah, it's my daughter will argue over anything. That need to constantly argue everything. And you're right, you say yes to something straight away. It's almost like it was too easy. I didn't have to work for that.
There's a draw after the chase of the argument that they need to feel like they've worked going through a negotiation rather than the other person saying, or me, for the 10 apples, that do they not feel sort of fulfilled that they've got what they want without the negotiation?
Yeah.
That's a really good point, actually, Chris. And I think you're absolutely correct that it needed to have a bit more work, energy, and time spent of, well, I really want And I know when we have the negotiation of how much time, say, on the Xbox, sometimes it'll even go up by a minute and you're like, okay.
It's given the illusion that you've lost more than what you have.
And every morning at the moment we've been having, do I need to go to school? We're in a really fortunate position because his school do online school, which he quite enjoys. I don't answer. And after a while, he goes downstairs dressed and where's my breakfast? And I'm like, oh, okay. Then if I say yes or no, the argument then kicks off. And so when I just sort of go, well, I don't know. And this morning, because he's got half term next week, he's been asking for the last couple of days not to go in. And I was sort of like, oh, well, let's, ignored answering. And he was ready. And I was quite like, oh, brilliant.
There are some really funny aspects to having a PDA child. My daughter has no filter either. I don't know if you come across that, but I was driving down the street and there was this guy, poor guy, obviously he had an eye patch on.
Ooh.
And my daughter I had the windows down, it was the middle of summer, and it's a pirate! And this guy stopped. Hide under the steering wheel. It was just so embarrassing. We had this one where it's the whole saying no to something. So it's just like, if you want something to happen, say no. And Sienna, when she was really young, I don't know how, I can't imagine, but she learned to say f*** or sake. It wouldn't have been me driving or anything like that would have taught her that. She started repeating it. We'd be walking through Tesco and she'd go, and you're like, oh, what am I going to do? Because she was so young, the intonation was like, fuck sake. And you get some really funny looks. And I managed to find on Amazon a big stuffed fat snake.
Oh.
And I bought it, and every time she used to say it, I'd have it on stage. Fat snake, here's fat snake, everybody.
Excellent. Fantastic. I love it.
Have you ever lost your drive for this? Because obviously PDA Sanctuary, looking at what you've achieved, and it's been a journey for you. What has been your drive?
For me, I lost my drive before I created everything. So I had burnout after years of, we had the experience, like many families, of being told no, he wasn't on the spectrum. And that was before we learnt about PDA. And so for me, since finding out, looking at, and I put myself as a client for a year. The challenge of being a holistic therapist, if you're not fully up and running, unlike perhaps some other jobs where you can put a mask on, and that is a bit of a cliche because a lot of PDAs will put a mask on and at the moment in this environment. But, if I was working in a supermarket or somewhere else and I could just put that, I could have kept working. However, when you're looking after other people's well-being and your own well-being has crashed, you can't. I had, 6 to 9 months where I really utilised myself as my own client. I did have some clients and did some stuff to keep everything ticking over. It's been in the last couple of years that I really saw what a big need there is within the PDA community, and also any neurodiversity. And I'm being asked quite a lot now by others, either by other coaches or by other parents, what about this neurodiversity? And I'm like, anybody who wants or needs either emotional wellbeing support, because of what I've gone on to train, everything I have is transferable. And I'm about to put a program together for a local carers organisation. I'm a real advocate. Mindset is so vital. And I think more so this year than any other year. To answer your question, there have been times definitely this year when I've questioned myself, Chris, doing so many firsts. You do question yourself, is this beneficial? Is this supportive? However, I run a free group and parents all the way through when I was putting wellbeing tips in. I do either put videos in or done lives. People say thank you for having the positive spin rather than some groups that are much more about the challenging behaviour. I still get caught up in it, you know. However, it's for me, that thing called reframing, you know, looking at the situation in a different way.
I wanted to ask you that with PDA Sanctuary and what you've started and what you've achieved, do you have a pinnacle achievement? Do you have where you want to be with PDA Sanctuary? Let's say in 10 years, where do you see PDA Sanctuary?
In 10 years' time, I would like to have had other parents, you know, trained so that they're able to run with it. You know, it's rolled out, that it's accessible to anybody, and that there's different levels. At the moment, it's quite therapeutic, the side. However, because I'm qualified now in so many different therapies, modalities, I'm able to take snippets of those, share them. Some of the videos are less than 5 minutes long, so that people can weave it into their everyday. And some of them may, you know, initially be like, well, why do I need to have a video on breathing? I'm breathing now, otherwise I'll be like. However, most of us, when we're stressed, breathe from our upper chest. Are you aware that when you do that breathing, how that has an impact on your, I'm not going to say mental capacity, but how that has an impact mentally on yourself?
But does that relate to when you hear a common phrase, take a deep breath? That's coming from the top of your lungs. I never knew that. That's a really interesting fact.
So when you're suggested to take, and normally it's to take a couple of deep breaths.
Yeah.
It really allows your whole lungs to really fill up with oxygenated air.
Yeah.
And to breathe out and release the carbon dioxide. And there are lots of different techniques around different styles of breathing to support somebody at different times. But very often when we're either very stressed, maybe in interview time as well, because of the speed of talking, we may be breathing from our upper respiratory. Yeah. It might be why you sort of go a bit red after doing some interviews.
You were picked up on that, Chris. Somebody commented the other day that when he laughs, he goes bright red.
Well, yeah, it's probably shallow breaths, but yeah, I think it's the camera, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
but Chris, if you're dealing with somebody who is, you know, you're in a challenging moment, what frequently happens, or if you're constantly on the run, you've got this upper breathing.
Yeah.
What then happens is you're not getting enough oxygen into the brain. When we don't get enough oxygen, then that really has an impact on our thinking. And so we're not able to be as slow and mindful and having that slower sort of thinking time. We're much more likely to be in that sort of, I call it circus, but that sort of zzz, going around a negative spiral because you haven't got enough oxygen. And we know this from, not that I've climbed Snowdonia or any of the other, you know, huge mountains, but we know that when those climbers have got up so far, there's been issues. And that's the same for us, that when we're, you know, not concentrating and when we're living in a stressful situation, we'll often just have this upper breath. So it's really simple things like saying, take a couple of deep breaths in, but I also then suggest of how and when. In regular times, and people may watch this when we're back in regular times, so just go into a gym, you have to physically leave your home, get in a vehicle, or if you're lucky enough to walk, but there are several actions. You don't just do the gym. And that can often stop people from doing the gym. The same with wellbeing. If someone feels that they've got to do an hour's yoga or, you know, a session, half an hour meditation, there's a block. Whereas if you can say, well, what do you do every day? Normally, most people put kettle on, go to the bathroom, brush their teeth. And you can't really do the breathing while you're brushing your teeth, but if you weave it into something you do every day.
There is a science behind it, because I used to speak at work. I'd have to stand at the front and I'd have to give a presentation, and I used to do this on a weekly basis. I found my first couple that even standing at the front giving a presentation, I was nervous, and obviously nerves caused me to shorten my breath. My short breath made me out of breath, and I sped up with my speech. I wasn't actually taking in the breath to do it. And it wasn't until I spoke to someone about it, it was actually one of my bosses at the time, and he said, if you just take a deep breath and breathe in and then speak slower, you can catch your breath in between. So it's almost like if you're reading a book, that comma is where you take your deep breath. And once he told me that, and I had it in my head for my next presentation, it went so smoothly, and it was so easy, all from just that big deep breath to slow everything down. My nerves came down, my speech was slower, I got my points across, I emphasized a lot better, rather than being this kind of twitching, red-faced moron at the front who couldn't get anything out.
Yeah, and absolutely, and it does. It means your heart rate's slower, which then the whole body system is going to go slower. And the reason I encourage people to twin it with something else that they're doing is you're more likely to do it. If you have to physically, there's a transition between, I'm not a gym bunny, but if I was, how you get from your home or your work to the gym, which is why they often say do it before work or on your way home from work, because it's twinning it, because you're more likely then to do that activity. So adding and weaving in some well-being into your everyday. So parents who have children with any neurodiversity, but especially PDA, are often running, trying to resolve so many different things. To then add in something else is too much. So creating it so that it's really simple, it's something that they can do without it being like, oh, right, I now need to sit and do half an hour meditation.
Is there any annoying reoccurring false statement that surrounds PDA, autism, ADHD that you keep on hearing? For instance, one that really grates me is that autistic can't feel empathy.
I suppose the big one was what parents and carers have been told by professionals. It doesn't exist. You're making it up. Your child is fine. It's you. It's your parenting. For me, it's because PDA is in a particular diagnostic manual, but it's those behaviours are there. And I think for me, it's that one or the other one, which was said to us through the process of seeing professionals, was that he gives eye contact.
The empathy one's one that definitely comes up for me a lot that you hear, because that's just a complete lack of understanding that the brain is just processing empathy in a different way.
Yeah.
And so just because you don't show it in that you're getting all googly over a kitten on YouTube doesn't mean you're not feeling empathy. It just means you're processing it in a different way and they're releasing it in a different way. I find the stupid hang-ups people get over, and it's more from professionals again, Nicola, like you were saying, the overphrasing of some things. So pathological demand avoidance is a really good one. We were in a meeting about my daughter at her school, and we had a CAMS rep there as part of the meeting. And when I said she's clearly showing signs of having a PDA profile, she's like, oh, we don't like that. I'm like, well, no, I know it's not diagnosed in our area, but it was actually one of your guys who told us about it, and that's how I came to research it. Oh, no, it's not that. We don't like the word pathological. And so she was quite happy to wipe off the whole idea of PDA based on the fact that pathological is part of the official title, so therefore we don't like it. And it's like, well, that's just stupid. That's like saying, I don't like lambs, therefore I won't have a Lamborghini. What the? It's just stupid. Like, just because something's in an official title somewhere doesn't mean that because you don't like a certain word, doesn't mean you can write the whole thing off.
What do you think the driving force is behind these misinformed statements?
I think part of it's around knowledge. And I think going just back to that word pathological, there's quite a big debate even within the PDA community of people saying that that word pathological, it conjures up quite a lot of different thoughts in most people's minds. And so therefore, for me, it's about knowledge, and it's about also open-mindedness. The whole aspect of those comments come from people that perhaps haven't yet really understood the deeper side of, say, autism, PDA, or any neurodiversity. I mean, it goes back to that thing of years ago of, not labelling. However, the positive of labelling gives us an understanding of either behaviours or how the brain works or how to support someone. But with that, there are some real negatives. So the other one is, I obviously have a son who masks. Now that can often, there's a terminology called the female presentation because girls often mask. But yeah, I think it's about lack of knowledge.
You're so right. That whole thing with masking. Oh man, there's one thing I'd love to see come out of all of that. It's that masking is taught to every teacher, so they can recognise and understand it. So when they say my kid's tearing the house apart, it doesn't get blamed. Oh, it's just because you're a shit parent. No, it's possible that they're masking at school, and so they get to their safe place and bam, that's when it all explodes, the old Coke bottle effect. If I could get every teacher to understand that and it to be something that's just taught that an element of autism is masking. So it may be that you're seeing a really model student, but if they're too much of a model student, it can actually be a warning sign.
Actually, it isn't just autism. Dyspraxia, any neurodiversity, and even young people that are anxious, who may not be on the spectrum, but that masking. And I think just having more of an open mind of looking at a bigger picture of why, rather than that finger pointing.
I do think we should, at some point, try to push this, that in schools, this should be taught. We know the discrimination against the neurodiverse, and it's down to misinformation, it's down to the uninformed, and we've openly admitted that we didn't know a great deal about autism or PDA or ADHD, any of these, until our children came along. Now, how different our world would have been if we would have gone through school and been taught even just the basic fundamentals, how much more accepting our society would be from those who have autism, ADHD, PDA, where it wouldn't be you're walking through a supermarket and you see a child having a meltdown. Now you ask quite a few people, I do understand it's getting better, but the large majority of people will turn around and say, what is wrong with that kid? Because they're completely unaware. So that education could be such a big fundamental building block to improving the broad education of everybody. So society is a lot more accepting.
Absolutely. And I think that includes, dyslexia, dyspraxia. I mean, as an adult who was diagnosed with dyslexia and then eventually dyspraxia, it would have explained so much more. And I think, they do now do something called PHSE. I'm never quite sure what any of that stands for, but in my day, giving extracurricular, and absolutely, they ought to go through different aspects of neurodiversity, but also sharing the positives. I recently went through paperwork and I found the list of all the amazing dyslexics. There's a list of all the most amazing people with autism who've done amazing things in the world.
I did an episode of PDA Dad based on entirely that, actually celebrities. And it was people I really respect. So Jerry Seinfeld has come out as being autistic. He's on the spectrum. Dan Aykroyd, Daryl Hannah. But so many, like Einstein was likely autistic at some level. So many amazing things have been done because of autistic people. It sounds like an odd reference, but I don't know if any of you have seen, I think it was Predators, but the kid in it is autistic.
Really?
And he is seen as more of a warrior by the predators. because he's the next stage of evolution, is the idea.
Did they give reference to that he was autistic in the film?
Yeah, he gets picked on at school because he had a meltdown in the classroom and he was stimming. And the predators are like, we want the one named Smith or something. I can't remember what the guy's name was. It was the last name. The dad thought it was him because he was the big macho.
Yeah.
Used to be a Marine type guy. And it was actually the son that they recognised as being the next stage because of his autism. And it was like, in a really stupid film, but by the same token, it was such a cool way of representing autism sort of separately. I love guys like Dan Harmon. I don't know if you probably may not have heard of him. He's a writer, and he's Rick and Morty, you may have heard of.
Yeah, big fan.
He did a show called Community, which is one of my favourite shows of all time, one of the best comedies ever written, 6 series they've done. And one of the key members of it's a community college, and one of the students there is this guy called Abed, who is autistic. And he makes the show. You couldn't almost do the show without him. He's like the linchpin that ties it all together, because the humour comes from his, like we spoke with Sophie, that idea that just having a slightly different perspective on life gives you comedy. And it's the same sort of thing. He's absolutely brilliant. There are so many really influential and powerful and amazing autistic people, but we always get sucked back into that whole, he doesn't look like Rain Man. So,
well, that actually leads me. Has there been any fictional TV programs that have done the portrayal of autism in a positive light?
Another sort of comedy.
Bang Theory.
Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
Sheldon Cooper. Yeah.
Yeah. Sheldon, definitely on the spectrum. I love Doc Martin. I think that's a really good one. They've never openly said that he's neurodiverse, but it's an obvious thing within it. I think they deliberately don't label it, so to speak. But I love that. And if you're ever watching Doc Martin, the names they insert when he comes out to call for other patients.
Noah Cant. Go through. Anita Bush.
Do you know Dan Gleebles?
Yeah, he's my husband's best friend.
Teresa Green. Go through.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
Brilliant. They are the funniest names, and when you realise it's not an obvious thing, they're just suddenly in there. I also liked House. I think House was clearly somewhere on the spectrum.
Do you think we should be taking into account our enjoyment of the programme? Because I do like The Big Bang Theory. I think it's funny. I think it's well written. I think it's brilliantly acted. But obviously there's some out there who have autism that find it extremely offensive.
absolutely. I think it's an interesting thing, isn't it? You generally will offend somebody somewhere, somehow, by saying something somewhere, somehow. However, I think when it's quite personal, I think it does need to be checked. And I think when they work alongside actors, writers, who they're writing, you know, the theme is about, is to check in. I can only talk for myself as a dyslexic and a dyspraxic. If there was a comedy about someone who's dyslexic or dyspraxic bumping into things, I would be like, yeah, absolutely. That is me to a T. Dropping things, and even a joke I don't anymore, but dropping Sharp 9. There may be somebody who would find that really offensive. I'd be like, no, hands up. That is the challenge of my dyspraxia. It's that mindfulness, isn't it? Mindful of how we perceive things, how things are put out there, and that being careful that it isn't perhaps deemed just either the negative rather than the whole piece.
Yeah.
You know, because I think you look at some of the famous people in all of these industries, especially art as well, to sing those praises. So probably not answered your question. I'd make a good politician, I think.
There's times, because I have, sometimes I have difficulty concentrating, and my memory's a bit all over the place, especially if I'm nervous. And I've been for quite a few job interviews, and I'll ask a question and start a sentence, and I will carry on. And as I'm talking, I'm thinking, what question was it they wanted me to ask? I carry on and on. And after 2 minutes, they go, that's all a great point, but You haven't answered the question. And I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Billy Connolly says he does that a lot. People say he's got this magic gift of being able to bring it back round.
Yeah.
He said it's completely accidental. It's because he starts off and he keeps waffling until he remembers what the hell he was talking about in the first place. And gets
I don't think he does it accidentally though, like coming back. And he's also admitted he's chronically dyslexic and probably dyspraxic.
Yeah.
And so then the mind's gone, and then he's like, oh.
I had a question, Nicola. You talk about the sort of the well-being of parents and stuff like that. How do you, aside from what you talk, we know with the mindfulness, with the that side of things, what do you do that just keeps you sane? I'm thinking more along the lines of like hobbies. Do you go out places? Is there anything which you just really draw enjoyment from that helps you with that sense of well-being?
Yeah, I love walking, either on my own or with the dog. And we're really, really blessed actually, because I'm close to the sea as well as the woods. Yeah, I had quite an interesting adventure yesterday.
What happened?
Near where I live, there's some islands, and there's one that you can walk to, and I've never done it. I've lived here 8 years, Sully Island, and it's linked by the sea tides. So you can walk there when the tide is out. I knew that there was a timeline, but I didn't realise that it was only 3 hours, the timeline. And then you can be on the island and it becomes an island.
So you got stranded?
Yeah, yesterday I was really enjoying the sun and that feeling of being able to just look at huge expanse of water, and missed my time by 5 minutes. Oh, no. And initially it just looked like a stream in a river, but I could see the undercurrent. And so, yes, I managed to get myself stranded on the local Sully Island, who need to be picked up.
You got picked up.
Yes, I'm really blessed that we have 2 RNLI stations nearby, and they rescued me. I feel quite silly and sad, not sad, but that I obviously needed to utilise their services. I mean, I know that I didn't take away from anyone else's emergency at the time. However, you know, using something that is there under emergency rather than due to my own lack of executive functioning. Yeah, I mean, classic. And I had the dog as well, and he was like...
There's an island near us called Lundy Island. Got into one of these, you know, these groups of business owners, small business owners, who all meet together for a breakfast, these business breakfast things. It was my first one. It was like, well, you've got to introduce yourself. It's a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous. It's, hi, I'm Duncan, and I own a small business. And this guy had been going off about how nightmarish this trip across to Lundy Island was from where we were, and it was a real rant he was going on. So he got to me, and he was like, "So, and who's this?" I said, "Oh, well, I'm Duncan. I'm launching a business doing boat trips to Lundy Island," and you could see his face. Like, I'm just kidding. And he's like, oh, yeah.
I'm sure that, well, I know that there were people taking photos and videos as I came back across to the place called Sully. I didn't, you know, take the moment to take some photos of the boat coming to rescue me. I thought, you know, that would be a little bit indiscreet. But I have wanted a bit of an adventure, and I have missed not being able to go abroad. So and I do keep saying I want to live on my own island, so there you go.
It's just careful what you wish for, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's the other interesting thing, is in the sanctuary I've been doing about our internal dialogue and our self-talk. Yeah, you know, be mindful of what you keep asking for.
This is an interesting, the whole self-talk thing. I think Americans are really good at the self-talk thing. I don't know what it is, but there's this kind of, it's not... Here, you're in the UK, in Australia as well, if you're really upping yourself, you come across as being arrogant. In America, to say, oh, I'm tops at that, I'm really good, it's almost like, yeah, good on you, you got some self-confidence.
I think also that it's a part of their sort of culture, but I'm talking about even internally. You know, if you internally, how you talk about yourself, if you've got positive internal talk or negative. And I think for a lot of people, full stop, have quite can have a negative self-talk. And I think parents who have children that have got challenges can often be more so, because those challenges are pushing them and they're at the brink. And when we're hitting a brink, we're more likely to use those negative scripts. And I think the Americans have done, you know, whatever your thoughts are about therapy and other bits and pieces, they're much more willing to delve deep inside. Whereas us Brits, you know, I think sort of post-war, it's push it down, keep smiling, keep going. And actually, I think that can often be what creates a lot of the problems, why people won't ask for help, why we've got such an issue around suicides, mental health, because we don't talk about it. And this goes back to what you both said around wanting teachers to understand about masking. And we said about everybody understanding neurodiversity, but I think it comes to a much bigger issue in the UK and Western society of, if we can't see something, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But we've for years been pushed to keep smiling, keep going, you know, rather than being able to say, I'm having a tough day, but then learning how to ask or accept help, rather than, you both have worked in industries that, you know, when somebody keeps complaining, they don't come out of it feeling great unless a solution is given to them.
Absolutely.
And that spiral of complaint brings us down, which, you know, I run a free group, the PDA parent space, and I work really hard to encourage parents to reword, because when we put it down as I don't necessarily like the word moan, but dismissing a child, we'll spiral that. We're never going to say, wow. Whereas if we can reframe it of, I'm noticing that I find it really difficult when this happens, it really gives us the opportunity to start having that conversation. And I think generally in the UK, we find that really difficult. And whereas America are much more open to reframing, relooking, rewording, how to put things across, and it's something that's spoken about more. And this is why I'm so passionate about the sanctuary and passionate about creating support, emotional support for parents, if it's in a group or a one-to-one. Because when we have that power of knowing I have that struggle, but what can I do to re-look at it? And I still, you know, get caught up. I have two children with different needs, with different diagnoses. They're both, you know, two with different neurodevelopmental challenges. And so, yeah, I put my hands up a lot that I can still get caught up in that twirl, but I'm much quicker at getting out.
And also, the British, we have this silly saying of stiff upper lip.
Yeah.
We need to be isolated, that we need to be perceived as strong-minded, strong-willed, strength in general, physically. And I think we've gone a long, long time as a society in the UK where that has been the benchmark of what we should be, that we don't need help.
Thanks so much for joining. Please do like, please do comment, please do subscribe to my channel. It really gets the message out there and gets this in the ears of the people who need to hear it. Have a fabulous week, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.